Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into something, well, kind of a paradox, isn't it?
It really is.
An app that's basically built, around the idea that content vanishes is actually causing some serious long-lasting harm, especially for younger users.
Yeah, that's the core of it.
So we're going deep into the sources, the research, the cases, exploring Snapchat's whole ephemeral thing.
Yeah.
And how that very design creates these huge gaps for things like cyberbullying, sextortion, just really serious risks.
Exactly. And our mission today, for you listening, isn't just to list off the bad things that happen. We really need to understand how the design itself makes it possible.
Like the mechanics of it.
Precisely. We're looking at what the sources call the deletion myth. This idea that content is temporary is, well, it's powerful, but it's really misleading. And we need to see how that belief opens the door to bullying, to sextortion, and creates huge problems for, say, getting evidence later.
It makes challenges for parents, for law enforcement.
For the victims themselves, most importantly, we're asking why the platform's architecture works this way.
Okay, so let's try and unpack that. The main draw, right, that the snaps disappear. According to the sources, that's also its biggest flaw. The key finding seems to be that this promise of vanishing content gives people this false sense of security.
A really dangerous one.
Yeah, dangerous because it encourages sharing things they maybe wouldn't otherwise, like riskier stuff, explicit content, believing it won't stick around.
And that's the psychological hook right there. You think it's temporary, so you let your guard down. But, if it really disappears, why are we seeing so much harm?
Right. That's the question. If it deletes itself, where's the loophole? How does the harm stick around?
Where does it leak out?
Yeah.
Well, there are two main ways the supposedly temporary content becomes pretty permanent harm. First one's kind of obvious. The person receiving it.
It should take a screenshot.
Exactly. Or use another phone to record the screen. Easy. And historically, there were those third-party apps, too, like YOLO and LNK.
Oh, yeah, I remember those. They plugged right in.
Right. Even if those specific ones are gone now, the point is the content gets captured, often like seconds after it's sent. And then it's out. It can be spread anywhere on platforms where nothing disappears.
So the damage jumps systems. Becomes permanent even if the original snap is technically gone.
That's it. And the second loophole, this one's often tougher for the victims.
Okay.
Because the content vanished, they often have no record, no proof. Imagine you're a teen, you get this horrible bullying message. It's gone in, what, 5 seconds?
You can't show anyone.
Exactly. It makes reporting it to parents, teachers, even the police incredibly difficult. And that feeling of having no solid evidence, it just makes the isolation and helplessness feel so much worse.
Okay, let's drill down on one specific thing you mentioned, screenshots. The sources talk about the screenshot dilemma, that little notification, the one that tells you someone screenshotted your snap.
Yeah, meant for privacy, right? Transparency.
Right, but it can be turned into a weapon. How does that work?
Well, that notification isn't just information. In a bullying context, it's power. The sources show how a bully can deliberately screenshot something sensitive, something maybe shared in confidence.
Well, it's something embarrassing.
Right. And then that notification pops up for the victim. It proves right then there that the content is captured, it's out of their control. It ramps up the anxiety massively.
And that fear, that panic, that makes them more vulnerable to threats like sextortion.
It's a key lever for it, absolutely. Knowing the victim saw the screenshot notification adds pressure.
What's really striking here is what the sources say about internal knowledge at Snap.
Yeah, this is critical. Internal documents cited in the research apparently show that Snap knew about these risks. They knew minors were vulnerable to grooming, that bad actors could use the algorithms to find kids.
So this wasn't some surprise problem that popped up later?
It seems the potential was understood pretty early on, which, raises questions.
It really does. And their own internal research showed parents were worried, specifically about the disappearing messages, limiting their ability to, supervise.
Yes. Because how can you oversee what you can't see? From a design perspective, that lack of visibility for parents is, well, it's arguably a feature, not a bug.
Okay, let's shift to the design itself. It's not just the core ephemeral feature causing issues. The sources point to specific techniques, dark patterns, right? Things baked into the app that manipulate users.
Absolutely. And these contribute directly to negative mental health stuff.
Is the platform sort of actively encouraging stressful use?
You could definitely argue that. These dark patterns are basically gamification, but engineered to exploit our psychology. The research highlights two big ones, snap streaks and snap score.
Okay, snap streaks. That just seems like a little number, right? How many days in a row you've snapped someone?
Seems harmless, but it's really powerful. It taps directly into something called loss aversion.
Meaning we hate losing things more than we like gaining them.
Exactly, like twice as much psychologically. So the pressure to not break the streak becomes immense, especially for teens whose social status can feel tied to it. They end up sending snaps daily, sometimes just blank screens, just to keep the number going.
So it's not about actually talking. It's just compulsive interaction driven by fear.
Fear of loss, yeah. And that creates real stress, real anxiety about maintaining these, artificial connections.
Wow, okay. And snap score, the number next to your name.
Similar dynamic. It's visible to friends, so it fuels this intense social comparison. Who's more popular? Who's more active? It pushes users to constantly interact just to boost that number, boost their perceived status, often forgetting about their actual well-being.
It's wild how simple numbers can tap into such deep social anxieties. Okay, let's bring it back to group stuff. The sources talk about ephemeral group chats and piling on.
Yeah. When a group coordinates harassment in a chat where messages disappear quickly, well, the attackers feel less accountable. They know the evidence of them all ganging up is just poof, gone. It allows bullying to escalate faster, more intensely.
And then there are the quieter forms of harm, like story shunning. What's that?
This one's particularly cruel, actually. It uses the public story feature for social exclusion. Imagine there's a party, everyone invited is posting videos to their story.
Right.
If you were deliberately not invited, you open the app and you see it all happening, live. Real-time evidence you were left out. The sources say people post specifically to show who was there, and by implication who wasn't. It's a really painful, visible form of social rejection built right into how stories work.
Gosh, and on top of all this, there's the anonymity problem. Bullies can just come back.
It makes moderation incredibly hard. If a bully's account gets suspended, what stops them from creating a new, fake one? A burner account. Takes minutes. Trust and safety teams have a nightmare trying to permanently remove persistent bad actors. Yeah. Accountability is tough.
And the sources really drive this home with some devastating case studies, linking these design issues directly to, well, the worst possible outcomes.
Yeah, the human cost it's stark. The sources focus on a couple of incredibly sad cases. First, Carson, he was 16, died by suicide in 2020 after relentless anonymous harassment.
And this was linked to those third-party apps, YOLO and LMK.
Directly. They integrated with Snapchat, allowed totally anonymous messages, making it impossible to trace the bullies. That lack of traceability was key.
Led to a lawsuit, right?
A major one, yeah. Accusing Snap of basically promoting these dangerous anonymous tools. Those integrations were eventually suspended.
And the other case?
Tilly Rosewarne in 2022. She also died by suicide. In her case, a fake explicit photo, likely a deepfake, was circulated. It caused horrific abuse.
Even if the original Snap vanished.
Exactly. It shows that the impact is permanent, even if the first message isn't. Once that kind of malicious content gets out, it spreads everywhere, way beyond Snapchat. The emotional damage is lasting.
So beyond these heartbreaking headlines, what are the broader measurable harms the research connects to these design choices?
Well, they're systemic. We see high rates of sextortion, people being coerced after sharing something they thought was private, huge amounts of non-consensual image sharing, revenge porn, and now, increasingly, those AI deepfakes.
And the mental health links.
Very strong associations in the literature. These addictive patterns, fueled by things like streaks and scores, are linked to higher risks of self-harm, suicidal thoughts, chronic stress, anxiety, FOMO, especially in teens.
And then if harm does occur, trying to get justice or even just document it runs into walls because of the ephemerality.
Big time. It creates huge forensic and legal hurdles. Research shows that getting data back can sometimes be possible from device caches or server logs, but it's way more complex, way more expensive, and often incomplete compared to standard platforms.
Because the data might only exist briefly.
Right. You often need subpoenas for server logs, which might not even hold the message content itself, just metadata. It fundamentally puts victims at a disadvantage legally because the evidence is designed to be transient and hard to grab.
Okay, this all sounds quite bleak, but thankfully, the sources also talk about mitigation. Strategies on different levels, platform changes, education, legal stuff. What has Snapchat actually done?
They have introduced some tools. There's the Family Center lets parents see friend lists who their teen's been talking to recently.
But not the messages themselves.
Correct. That's the crucial limitation. Parents can see who they talked to in the last 7 days, but not what was said. So the core risk area, the private messages, remains largely unsupervised.
Still a gap there.
A big one. They also use AI trying to detect risky conversations, and they have that Here For You mental health resource portal.
So what are the recommendations then? To tackle the core design problem, the sources mention adding friction.
Yeah, basically making it harder to act impulsively. Things like adding active warnings before someone shares something intimate. Hey, remember, this can be screenshotted. Or maybe delay timers, like a few seconds pause before sending risky content. Or even just a simple, are you sure? Prompt.
Does that actually work? A few seconds.
Studies suggest it does, yeah. Even a small delay can significantly cut down on impulsive high-risk sharing. It gives people a moment to reconsider.
Okay. And what about helping victims get evidence? Is there a tech fix proposed?
Yes. A key recommendation is for the platform to build a secure way for a victim or maybe a parent via Family Center to capture a reliable, time-stamped snapshot of harmful content. Something admissible for law enforcement, even if the message vanishes from the chat interface.
Shifting the evidence burden off the victim in that moment of crisis.
Exactly.
So focusing on parents and educators now, what's the most practical advice coming out of the sources for them dealing with this deletion myth?
Open communication is always key, setting expectations with things like family tech agreements. But the single most vital, hands-on strategy they need to teach teens.
What's that?
Save the evidence. Teach kids. If you see something hurtful, something harassing, screenshot it immediately, before it disappears. That screenshot is crucial if they need to report it later.
Got it. Capture it instantly. And you mentioned lawsuits like Carson brides are pushing for bigger changes.
That's right. There's growing legal pressure, more calls for actual legislation to hold platforms accountable for design choices that harm minors. It's part of a larger trend demanding safety be prioritized over just, engagement numbers.
So we've really covered the whole arc here. The design paradox, the tragic consequences, and potential ways forward. The big takeaway seems to be this ephemeral design really messes with the social math of sharing, lowers the perceived risk, but actually creates these new, serious, measurable dangers.
Definitely. Amplified by things like streaks that keep users hooked in stressful ways.
And we saw just how pertinent that deletion myth is, how it drives risky choices.
Which leads to a final thought, something for you to chew on. If knowing the truth reduces risky behavior, think about this. We know these apps actually keep tons of data on the back end. Metadata, locations, friend lists, it's not really all gone.
Right. The back-end reality is different.
Totally different. So the question is, what percentage of users need to truly understand that back-end reality, that the data is retained before their own personal risk assessment changes? How many need to grasp that gap between the disappearing front end and the recorded back end before behavior shifts on a larger scale? That deep misunderstanding is really the core problem we still need to solve.